Part 1: The Noise of the World and the Forgotten Art of Silence. Picture this. You wake up in the morning, and before your feet even touch the ground, the noise begins. The buzzing of your phone, endless notifications, people online already arguing, sharing opinions, posting updates, fighting for attention. Then you head out. Traffic is loud, conversations overlap. The world demands that you join in the constant chatter. And somewhere inside all this noise, you hear a quiet voice. Your own voice, but it's muffled, drowned out. It's as if the world is so full of speaking that we've forgotten how to listen. This is the paradox of our age. We are surrounded by more communication than ever before, yet genuine listening, true reflection, and thoughtful silence are becoming rare. And here's where the wisdom of the Stoics comes in. The ancient Stoic philosophers, Marcus Aurelius, Seneca, Epictetus, lived in a world far quieter than ours. No smartphones, no constant news cycle, no social media noise. And yet, even then, they already warned against excessive speaking. They knew the tongue could be dangerous. They knew that words, once spoken, are like arrows. You can't pull them back. They believed that silence was not emptiness but strength, a weapon sharper than any word. Epictetus, one of the great Stoic teachers, once said, "We have 2 ears and 1 mouth, so that we can listen twice as much as we speak." Think about that for a second. 2 ears, 1 mouth. Nature itself designed us for more listening, less talking. But look around, are we following that design? Or have we flipped it upside down, talking endlessly while rarely pausing to hear, to understand, to reflect? Silence, in the Stoic sense, is not weakness. It's not the absence of words because you're scared or because you have nothing to say. No, silence is discipline. It's mastery of yourself. It's knowing when words will serve and when they will destroy. It's recognizing that sometimes the strongest response is no response at all. Let's be honest here. Talking is easy. It feels good to jump into every discussion, to prove a point, to defend yourself, to show off knowledge. But real power is not in adding more noise. Real power is in restraint. Real power is in silence. Because silence forces you to do the hard thing, to listen. Listening is uncomfortable. Why? Because it means putting your ego aside. It means resisting the urge to interrupt, to prepare your reply while the other person is still speaking. It means absorbing their words without immediately rushing to defend or argue. That's difficult. And yet, it's where wisdom begins. Seneca, another Stoic giant, warned his students about people who speak too much. He said, "Most people talk a great deal and say very little." Doesn't that sound familiar today? Open social media and you'll see it everywhere. People talking, posting, shouting. But how much of it carries real weight? How much of it actually teaches something, uplifts someone, or leads to wisdom? This is why silence matters. In silence, you give your mind space to think. In silence, you give others the respect of being heard. In silence, you give yourself the strength to choose your words carefully. And when you finally do speak, your words carry weight. Think of the leaders you've admired in your life. Maybe it was a teacher, a mentor, a parent, or even a figure you've only read about. Did they rush to fill every pause with chatter? Or did they speak with calmness, with presence, with gravity? Usually, the people we respect most are not the loudest. They are the ones who speak less, but when they do, everyone listens. Why? Because silence creates presence. Silence builds an aura. When you don't rush, when you don't need to dominate the room with words, people notice. They lean in. They respect the restraint. And in that restraint, they sense strength. Now, here's where the Stoic mindset connects deeply. Silence isn't just about what happens between you and others. It's also about what happens inside of you. A noisy mind cannot be calm. A noisy mind cannot be stoic. But silence within, gives you clarity. It gives you space to see things as they are, not as your emotions or impulses distort them. Marcus Aurelius, writing in his meditations, often reminded himself to return to inner quiet. He said, "The soul becomes dyed with the color of its thoughts." What are your thoughts dyed with when you're surrounded by noise all day? When you're constantly speaking, constantly reacting, constantly defending? But if you cultivate silence, even for a few minutes, you let your soul reset. You let it breathe. You let it return to its natural state of strength. So part one of our journey into silence and Stoicism is this. We live in a noisy world, but silence is a forgotten art we must reclaim. It is not weakness. It is not emptiness. It is the foundation of a disciplined, powerful, Stoic mind. As we continue, we'll dive deeper into what silence looks like in practice, how it becomes a form of self-discipline, how it transforms the way we interact with others, and how it can even disarm conflict and bring peace where anger usually rules. But for now, sit with this thought. Maybe the world doesn't need your voice at every moment. Maybe your greatest power is not in what you say, but in what you choose not to say. Part 2: Silence as Self-Discipline, Training the Stoic Mind. In Part 1, we explored how the world is drowning in noise, and how silence is the forgotten art that Stoics saw as strength rather than weakness. Now, let's go one layer deeper. Silence as self-discipline. Think of discipline for a moment. When we hear the word, we often imagine physical routines. Waking up early, exercising, working hard, staying consistent. But what about discipline of the tongue? What about discipline of the mind that controls the urge to speak? That kind of discipline is far harder to master, and yet it might be the most important of all. Epictetus, who began life as a slave and later became one of the greatest Stoic teachers, understood this perfectly. He told his students, "First learn the meaning of what you say, and then speak." In other words, don't just speak to fill silence. Don't just speak because you feel the urge. Speak because you've thought, because you've measured, because you've chosen. That takes discipline. And discipline starts with restraint. The impulse to speak. Why do we talk so much? Often, it's because silence makes us uncomfortable. If there's a pause in a conversation, we feel the need to fill it. If someone says something we disagree with, we feel the need to jump in and argue. If someone insults us, we feel the urge to defend ourselves immediately. But all these reactions come from impulse. And Stoicism is, at its core, about mastering impulse. It's about creating space between what happens and how you respond. That space, that pause, is where wisdom lives. And silence is the practice of that pause. Think about it. Every time you resist the urge to speak immediately, you are training your mind. You're saying to yourself, "I am in control. My emotions do not dictate my words. My ego does not control my tongue." That's discipline. Marcus Aurelius and the weight of words. Marcus Aurelius, the philosopher-emperor, lived with constant noise. Political advisors, generals, citizens demanding attention. But in his private writings, he reminded himself over and over, "If it is not right, do not do it. If it is not true, do not say it." Notice the precision here. Marcus understood that words have weight. A careless word from an emperor could cost lives, start wars, or destroy trust. So he disciplined himself. Only what is right, only what is true. Nothing more. Now, you and I may not be emperors, but our words also carry weight. A sharp reply can wound someone we care about. A careless joke can break trust. A hasty argument can create enemies. Once spoken, words cannot be taken back. That's why silence, as discipline, is so powerful. It forces us to ask, does this need to be said? Is this true? Is this kind? And often the answer is no. The respect earned from silence. Let's look at this practically. Imagine you're in a meeting at work or in a discussion with friends. Everyone is rushing to share their opinion. Voices overlap, people argue, people interrupt. But you, what if you wait? What if you listen? What if you don't jump in right away? First, it feels awkward. You worry others will think you have nothing to contribute. But then something interesting happens. People start noticing. They see that when you do speak, it's thoughtful. It's measured. It's worth listening to. This is how silence earns respect. Not because you stay quiet forever, but because you show restraint. You show that you don't need to prove yourself with constant talking. And when you finally speak, your words land with more force. The Stoics understood this deeply. Seneca once wrote, "It is better to be silent and be thought a fool than to open your mouth and remove all doubt." Now, of course, this doesn't mean we should live in fear of speaking. It simply means, don't waste words. Don't speak for the sake of speaking. Discipline your speech so that when you use it, it matters. The daily practice of silence. So how do we build this discipline of silence in daily life? It's not about taking vows of silence or withdrawing from society completely. It's about small, intentional practices that train the mind. Here are a few Stoic-inspired exercises. 1. The pause before replying. In every conversation, practice waiting a few seconds before you respond. Even just 3 seconds of silence can transform the quality of your reply. That pause gives you space to consider. Is this necessary? Am I reacting emotionally or rationally? 2. Verbal fasting. Just like fasting with food trains the body, fasting with words trains the mind. Choose a period, maybe 1 hour, maybe half a day, where you speak only when absolutely necessary. Notice how much of what you usually say is unnecessary. Notice how your thoughts become sharper when you hold them back. 3. Silent observation. Spend a few minutes each day in silence. Not just without speaking, but without distractions. No phone, no music, no conversation. Just listening to your surroundings, to your own thoughts, to the rhythm of the world around you. This cultivates inner quiet. 4. Writing instead of speaking. The Stoics wrote constantly. Marcus with his meditations, Seneca with his letters, Epictetus with his recorded discourses. Writing is a form of silent speech. It allows you to clarify your thoughts without the risk of careless words. Next time you feel the urge to say something quickly, try writing it first. Silence as power in conflict. One of the greatest tests of discipline is conflict. Someone insults you. Someone provokes you. The natural impulse is to defend, to attack back, to speak words of anger. But silence here is the ultimate form of control. The Stoic response to insult is not counterattack. It's silence. Why? Because silence denies the other person power. When you refuse to react, you show that their words cannot control you. You rise above. There's a story told of Socrates, who heavily influenced the Stoics. Once, someone insulted him in public. Rather than defend himself, Socrates simply smiled and walked away. His students asked why he didn't reply. He said, "When someone strikes you with a stick, do you strike back at the stick or at the person holding it?" He understood that insults say more about the speaker than the target. Silence was his discipline and his victory. Discipline today, a radical act. In our modern world, where every thought is tweeted, every opinion shared, every argument live-streamed, silence is a radical act of discipline. To not reply, to not argue, to not constantly express yourself, that's unusual. That stands out. And in standing out, it creates presence. It makes people notice. It shows that you are not controlled by impulse, but by reason. That's the Stoic way. That's silence as discipline. So remember, every time you hold back a word, you're not losing power, you're gaining it. Every time you choose silence over reaction, you're not being weak, you're being wise. Every time you pause, every time you listen, every time you choose restraint, you're strengthening the most important muscle of all, the disciplined mind. Part 3, the wisdom of listening. How silence transforms relationships. So far, we've talked about silence as a way to cut through the noise of the world, and as a form of self-discipline that builds inner strength. But silence does more than just shape our inner character. It also transforms the way we connect with others. And that's where listening comes in. You see, most people don't actually listen. They hear words, yes, but while the other person is talking, they're already preparing their response, crafting their counterargument, or thinking about their own story to share. That's not listening, that's waiting to speak. The Stoics knew this. Seneca, in his letters, wrote about the difference between hearing and listening. Hearing is passive, you let sounds hit your ears. Listening, on the other hand, is active. It requires humility. It requires patience. It requires silence. Why listening is rare? Listening is rare because it demands that we set aside our ego. And the ego doesn't like that. The ego wants to be heard, to be right, to be admired. So in conversations, the ego pushes us to jump in, to interrupt, to dominate. But here's the truth. When you speak less and listen more, you don't lose influence, you gain it. People feel respected when you truly listen to them. They feel understood. And respect is the foundation of trust. Think about the last time someone gave you their full attention, really listened without interrupting or rushing you. How did it feel? Probably rare. Probably powerful. Probably like you mattered. That's the gift of listening. The Stoic listener. The Stoics believed wisdom was found in observation. Epictetus told his students to be like an open book to learning, to absorb before speaking. When you listen with Stoic discipline, you're not just collecting words, you're studying human nature. You're noticing tone, emotion, what's said, and what's left unsaid. You begin to see patterns. When people speak out of fear, when they speak out of pride, when they speak out of truth. This ability makes you wiser. Why? Because wisdom isn't only about what you know. It's about understanding others, seeing the world through their eyes, learning from every interaction. And the only way to gain that is through silence and listening. Listening in leadership. Let's step into the realm of leadership for a moment. Whether you're leading a company, a family, a team, or even just your own life, listening is one of the most powerful tools you have. The best leaders aren't the ones who shout the loudest. They're the ones who listen deeply, take in perspectives, and then speak with clarity. Marcus Aurelius, as Emperor of Rome, wasn't surrounded by silence. He was surrounded by advisors, soldiers, and citizens with endless demands. But his strength as a leader was not in always speaking, but in listening, weighing carefully, and then deciding. When you listen as a leader, you make people feel valued. And when people feel valued, they give you loyalty. Listening in conflict. Silence is also transformative in conflict. Imagine someone is angry at you, throwing accusations, raising their voice. Most of us react instinctively, we defend ourselves, argue back, maybe even raise our own voice. But what happens if, instead, you listen in silence? At first, the other person is surprised. They expect resistance. They expect you to fight back. But when you stay calm, when you let them speak, something shifts. Often, their anger softens because it has nowhere to land. They may even start to feel embarrassed for overreacting. Silence in conflict doesn't mean you're agreeing. It doesn't mean you're weak. It means you're choosing control over chaos. It means you value peace over ego. And more often than not, it leads to a better outcome. Listening as learning. There's another side to listening beyond relationships, beyond conflict. Listening is how we learn. Every person you meet knows something you don't. Every conversation has the potential to teach you, if you're silent enough to absorb it. Seneca said, "While we teach, we learn." But the opposite is also true. While we listen, we learn. Think of the wisest people in history. Not the ones who shouted the loudest, but the ones who asked questions, who listened carefully, who absorbed before they spoke. Socrates, for example, is remembered less for giving long speeches and more for asking simple questions that forced others to think. He listened, and through listening he uncovered truth. In your own life, this means treating every interaction as a classroom. Don't just wait to reply, be curious. What can I learn from this person? What truth might be hidden in their words? What perspective can expand my own understanding? Practical listening exercises. So, how can we practice listening as the Stoics did? Here are some simple but powerful ways. 1. Repeat back what you hear. When someone finishes speaking, try summarizing what they said before replying. For example, "So what I'm hearing is that you felt overlooked in that meeting. Is that right?" This not only shows respect but forces you to listen fully instead of half listening. 2. Ask more questions. Instead of rushing to share your opinion, ask a follow-up question. Curiosity builds connection and reveals depth. The Stoics were masters of asking questions, because they knew wisdom comes not from talking, but from drawing out truth. 3. Resist the urge to interrupt. This is harder than it sounds, but discipline yourself to never cut someone off. Let them finish fully. Notice how your urge to jump in is usually about ego. Practice patience instead. 4. Silence after someone speaks. Try this. When someone finishes, wait a few seconds before responding. That silence often encourages them to share more, and you end up hearing the deeper truth. The power of feeling heard. At the heart of listening is this: people want to be heard. And when they are, something changes in them. They soften. They open up. They trust. The Stoic practice of listening doesn't just make you wiser, it makes you someone others feel safe with. And that is rare. In a world where everyone wants to talk, the one who listens stands out. Imagine building relationships where people know you as the person who truly hears them. Imagine being that leader, that friend, that partner. It doesn't just make you respected, it makes you unforgettable. Listening as silence within. And finally, let's connect this to the inner dimension again. Listening isn't only about others, it's also about yourself. How often do you actually listen to your own thoughts? Not drown them out with music, not silence them with distractions, but truly listen? Stoics practiced this daily, reflecting in journals, observing their thoughts in quiet moments. When you listen to yourself, you start to understand your fears, your desires, your patterns. And with understanding comes mastery, because you can't control what you don't notice. So, listening isn't just about building better relationships, it's about building a wiser self. Silence is the doorway to listening, and listening is the doorway to wisdom. When you stop rushing to be heard and instead give your full attention, you gain insight into others, you build stronger bonds, you learn what you didn't know, and you discover parts of yourself you might have ignored. The Stoics taught us that speaking less doesn't diminish us. It enlarges us. Because the more we listen, the more we grow. So the next time you're in conversation, remember, silence is not empty. It's the space where connection happens. And if you want to live with Stoic wisdom, learn this art of listening more and speaking less. Part 4: Silence in Conflict. Strength beyond words. Up until now, we've seen how silence cuts through the noise of the world, how it builds self-discipline, and how it transforms relationships through listening. But there's another arena where silence shines even brighter: conflict. Conflict is a test. It tests your patience, your ego, your self-control. And most of us fail that test because our first instinct in conflict is to react. Someone insults us, we fire back. Someone challenges us, we defend ourselves instantly. Someone raises their voice, we raise ours louder. It's human. It's instinctive. But Stoicism teaches us something radically different. In conflict, silence is not weakness. Silence is strength. Silence disarms. Silence protects. Silence transforms. The fire of insults. Let's start with insults. Words can sting. They can cut deep. And our natural impulse is to respond immediately. Maybe with anger, maybe with sarcasm, maybe with our own insult. But Marcus Aurelius advised otherwise. He wrote, "Choose not to be harmed, and you won't feel harmed. Don't feel harmed, and you haven't been." Think about that. The insult only works if you accept it. If you take it into yourself, believe it, and let it define you. But what if you meet it with silence? What if you simply let it pass like wind through an open window? The person insulting you expects a reaction. They want control. They want to see you angry. They want to know they got to you. Silence denies them that victory. It doesn't mean you agree with them. It doesn't mean you're weak. It means you've chosen not to give away your peace. That's real strength. The story of Socrates. The Stoics admired Socrates deeply, and one story about him illustrates this perfectly. Once, someone hurled harsh insults at Socrates in the marketplace, trying to provoke him. The crowd waited for his reply, but Socrates stayed calm, saying nothing. Eventually, when pressed on why he didn't defend himself, he said, "When a donkey kicks you, do you kick it back?" He understood something vital. Not every attack deserves a reply. Not every battle is worth fighting. By staying silent, Socrates showed that his dignity was untouched, his peace unshaken. Silence as strategy. Silence in conflict is not passive, it's strategic. Let's look at 3 ways it works. 1. Silence diffuses tension. When 2 people are shouting, tension escalates. But if one person stays calm and silent, the energy shifts. The fight has nowhere to go. Like a fire starved of oxygen, it begins to die down. 2. Silence gives you time. In conflict, reacting instantly often leads to regret. Silence gives you space. You can assess the situation, weigh your options, and respond with reason rather than emotion. 3. Silence protects your reputation. People remember how you handle conflict. Do you lose control, shouting and flailing? Or do you remain calm, composed, unmoved? The latter earns respect. Even your opponent may secretly admire your restraint. The ego's trap. Of course, staying silent in conflict isn't easy. The ego screams inside, "Don't let them disrespect you. Don't let them win. Say something back." But here's the truth. The louder you react, the more power you give away. You become predictable, easy to manipulate. Your opponent knows exactly which buttons to push. Silence, on the other hand, breaks that cycle. It frustrates the attacker because they can't control you, confuses them because they don't know what you're thinking, protects you because you haven't revealed your hand. The Stoics saw this clearly. The person who controls themselves in conflict is stronger than the person who conquers cities. Self-mastery is the ultimate victory. Silence in modern life. Let's make this practical. How does silence in conflict look today? At work, a colleague takes credit for your idea. Your first instinct is to snap back, to call them out publicly. But silence, measured silence, gives you time to strategize. Later, in private, you can address it calmly with clarity. And you'll be heard more seriously because you didn't explode in the moment. In relationships, a partner or friend lashes out in anger. Instead of arguing back immediately, silence allows them to vent while you remain steady. Often, when the storm passes, they regret their words, and you've preserved the relationship by not fueling the fire. Online, someone insults you on social media. You could fight back, feed the drama, escalate it. But silence, no reply at all, robs them of satisfaction. You move on with your peace intact, while they waste energy shouting into the void. In each case, silence doesn't mean you ignore the issue forever. It means you choose when and how to respond. That's wisdom, the warrior's silence. There's a certain kind of strength that comes from silence in conflict, a warrior's strength. Think of a seasoned fighter. They don't flail wildly. They don't waste energy on every feint. They conserve energy. They wait for the right moment. They act with precision. Silence is like that. It's the warrior's restraint. It says, I don't need to fight every battle. I don't need to waste words proving myself. I know my strength, and that is enough. This is why the Stoics were often compared to warriors of the mind. They didn't waste energy fighting every insult, every challenge. They saved their strength for what truly mattered, the inner conflict. But conflict isn't always with others. Often it's within ourselves. The inner voice that criticizes, that judges, that shames us. The thoughts that replay past mistakes, that worry about the future. How do we meet this inner conflict? With silence, meditation, journaling, stillness. These were Stoic practices to quiet the inner storm. By sitting in silence, by observing thoughts without reacting, they found peace. Marcus Aurelius practiced this daily. Surrounded by war and politics, he returned to silence in his writings. There, he reminded himself, you have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength. Silence is how you reclaim that power. Silence is how you end the inner war. So, what does silence in conflict teach us? It teaches us that the strongest response is often no response. That insults lose their power when we don't accept them. That anger burns itself out when it finds no fuel. That our reputation is built not by how loud we are in the fight, but by how steady we remain in the storm. Silence is not surrender, it's strategy. Silence is not weakness, it's wisdom. Silence is not losing, it's choosing which battles are worth your energy. The next time conflict comes, ask yourself, will words solve this? Or will silence serve me better? More often than not, silence will be your shield, your sword, and your victory. Part 5: Silence as the path to inner peace and a Stoic mindset. We've explored silence in the noise of society, silence in self-discipline, silence in relationships, and silence in conflict. But now we reach the heart of it all. silence as the path to inner peace. Because ultimately, Stoicism isn't just about handling the outside world. It's about mastering the world inside you. Silence, when practiced deeply, isn't just about closing your mouth. It's about opening space. Space to breathe, to think, to observe, to understand. Space to step outside the constant chatter of the world and of your own mind. And in that space, you find something priceless. Peace. The restless mind. Let's start with the problem. Our minds are restless. They chatter endlessly. They replay the past. They imagine the future. They complain. They judge. They worry. Seneca once wrote, "We suffer more in imagination than in reality." And he was right. Most of our suffering isn't caused by events themselves, but by our constant thinking about them. We're like a glass of muddy water that's always being stirred. The dirt never settles. The water never clears. Silence is the act of setting the glass down, not stirring it anymore, letting the dirt settle to the bottom so the water becomes clear. That's what happens when you practice silence. You see things as they really are. Meditation, Stoic style. When we think of meditation today, we often think of Eastern practices. But the Stoics had their own version. Marcus Aurelius meditated through writing. His meditations are really his private journal, where he practiced silence with himself. He asked questions, he reminded himself of principles, he stripped away illusions. Epictetus taught his students to examine their thoughts each day, to pause before reacting, to create that gap between stimulus and response. That gap, that moment of silence, is where freedom lives. Seneca advised periods of withdrawal from the noise of Rome, to sit quietly and think, to recalibrate the soul. For the Stoics, silence wasn't just the absence of noise, it was an active practice of reflection, of turning inward, of disciplining the mind. The noise of modern life. Fast forward to today. We live in an age where silence is rare. Our phones buzz constantly. Notifications, headlines, voices, all demanding attention. Even when we're alone, we fill the silence with music, podcasts, videos, scrolling. We are terrified of silence because silence confronts us with ourselves. But here's the paradox. The more we run from silence, the more restless we become. The more restless we become, the more we seek distractions. And the cycle never ends. The Stoic path is the opposite. Seek silence, embrace silence, live in silence. Because silence is not empty. It's full of answers we can't hear when the world is too loud. Silence and clarity. Think about the greatest decisions in your life. Chances are, clarity didn't come when you were drowning in noise. Came when things got quiet. Maybe on a walk, maybe late at night, maybe in a moment of stillness. Silence is clarity. Cuts away illusions. It shows you what matters and what doesn't. Epictetus said, "First say to yourself what you would be, and then do what you have to do." But how can you say to yourself what you want to be if you're never silent enough to hear your own voice? Silence helps you discover your direction. Without it, you risk living someone else's life, chasing someone else's dreams, being shaped by someone else's noise. Silence and freedom. One of the deepest Stoic insights is that freedom comes not from controlling the world, but from controlling your mind. Noise chains you, keeps you reactive, distracted, scattered. Silence frees you. It returns your power of choice. When you cultivate silence, you stop being a slave to every opinion, every distraction, every fear. You move through life with steadiness, with purpose, with resilience. Silence is the soil where freedom grows. Practical Stoic silence. So how do we practice this kind of silence? Let's make it simple and practical. 1. Morning silence. Start the day without noise. No phone, no news, no chatter. Just sit for a few minutes. Breathe. Ask yourself, what kind of person do I want to be today? 2. Silent walks. Take walks without headphones. Notice your thoughts, notice the world. Let silence walk beside you. 3. Writing in silence, like Marcus, journal quietly. Write your thoughts. Ask questions. Reflect. 4. Silent pauses. Throughout the day, pause before speaking. Pause before reacting. Even a few seconds of silence can save you from regret. 5. Evening silence, end the day with stillness. Review what happened. Where did you stay steady? Where did you lose control? What can you improve tomorrow? These small acts of silence build a powerful habit. Over time, they reshape your mind. Silence as inner fortress. The Stoics often spoke of building an inner fortress, a mind unshaken by storms, a heart untouched by chaos. Silence is the foundation of that fortress. When the world shouts, you don't have to shout back. When insults fly, you don't have to absorb them. When chaos reigns, you don't have to join in. You have silence, and silence is enough. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "Nowhere can man find a quieter or more untroubled retreat than in his own soul." That's what silence gives you. A retreat always available, wherever you are. It doesn't matter if you're in a noisy city, a stressful job, or a conflict-filled environment. If you've trained yourself in silence, you carry peace within you. The ultimate Stoic mindset. So what does silence build? It builds a Stoic mindset, a mind that listens more than it speaks, a heart that chooses peace over noise, a character that remains steady in storms. Silence builds patience. It builds strength. It builds clarity. It builds wisdom. And ultimately, silence builds freedom. The freedom to choose your response, the freedom to live by principle, the freedom to remain unshaken no matter what the world throws at you. Closing reflection. Let me leave you with this thought. Silence is not an absence. It is a presence. It is the presence of awareness, of clarity, of strength. It is the presence of your true self, beneath all the noise. If you want to live like a Stoic, start with silence. Speak less, listen more. React less, reflect more. Seek less noise, seek more stillness. And over time, you'll discover that silence is not just part of Stoicism. It is the very soil in which a Stoic mindset grows.